They didn't yell. They didn't cry. They didn't even ask why. When Asher Langley came out to his parents, the house stayed quiet. Too quiet. His father folded his napkin with clinical precision and placed it next to his untouched dinner. His mother continued buttering her roll as if her son hadn't just spoken the words that would redraw the map of his life forever. And when the silence finally broke, it wasn't with a hug. It was with a one-way bus ticket and a note that said, "This is not who we raised." Asher left the Langley house on a frost-bitten Sunday morning with a half-zipped backpack, $17 in crumpled bills, and the gut-deep certainty that he was now no one's son. No slammed doors, no final argument, just the sound of gravel crunching under his sneakers as he walked to the station, clutching a sketchbook he couldn't bear to leave behind. His father, Nathan Langley, was a retired Marine who ran their home like it was still a base discipline: pride, silence. 3 pillars stronger than love in his mind. His mother, Elaine, taught Bible study and flinched at the word different. Like it carried disease, together they wore respectability. Like armor, shiny enough for church, strong enough to deflect shame. But Asher had never been built to fit the Langley frame. He liked stillness more than speeches, drew more than he spoke. And when he finally told them that he loved boys, not out of rebellion, not for attention, but because it was the quiet, trembling truth inside him. They didn't explode, they imploded, they erased. He tried to sleep at a friend's, but teenage couches have expiration dates. Within days, he was sleeping under a bus shelter wrapped in a donation blanket, sketching people who passed by just to remember he existed. That's when someone finally saw him, not as a problem or a failure or a sin to be silenced. It was Walter, an old man with crooked glasses and watercolor stains on his sleeves. Walter walked by the shelter every Thursday with a bag of art supplies for the local community center. He noticed the drawings first, then the hands behind them. He didn't ask why Asher was out there. He asked what kind of pencils he liked. And when Asher's voice cracked trying to answer, Walter just handed him a set of Prismacolors and said, "Artists don't belong in the cold." That night, Asher had a bed, a real one, in a cramped attic above Walter's garage, surrounded by books on color theory, old jazz records, and canvases that smelled like turpentine. And hope he didn't cry. He couldn't. He just stared at the ceiling until his body stopped shaking. Walter didn't try to fix him. He made tea. He showed him how to stretch canvas. He asked about his favorite shade of blue. And slowly Asher learned that maybe home wasn't 4 walls or a last name. It was a place where you didn't have to apologize for breathing. He never told anyone what his parents did, not yet. He carried that silence the way some people carry scars, not to show, but to remember. But that scar would resurface years later in a way Asher never could have prepared for. Because one day, decades down the line, a little boy with his last name would unknowingly open the door to 2 ghosts from a life Asher thought he'd buried. And what happened next would change them all. If this story moved you, stay with us for part 2. And don't forget to subscribe to HeartStories, where every family, no matter how broken, has a chance to heal. Walter didn't believe in saving people. He believed in handing them a brush and letting them choose their own canvas. With him, Asher learned how to stretch silence into space, how to listen to grief without trying to fix it, and how to hold a cup of tea like it might spill his only warmth. They lived simply. Walter taught part-time at the community center, ran free art classes in the church basement, and sold handmade postcards for just enough to keep the heat running in the Indiana winters. Asher enrolled in night school, drew album covers for local bands, cleaned houses in the morning, and illustrated books in the evening. It was a life of quiet stitches, mending what had been torn. The attic room became a sanctuary. Walter never asked for rent, only that Asher water the plants and keep the brushes clean. On the door, he carved a small phrase: "Where light touches something, always grows." It wasn't fancy, but it was his. The first door that had ever opened without condition. But nothing lasts forever. Walter's cough started in autumn, a dry, hollow sound that refused to leave, even after the leaves had fallen. By the first snow, he needed help getting out of bed. By Christmas, he stopped pretending he would get better. Asher offered to take him to the hospital. Walter just smiled and said, "Son, I didn't survive 70 winters just to die under fluorescent lights." So Asher stayed. He made soup, changed sheets, read aloud, sat through nights where Walter couldn't sleep just so someone would be awake to remind him he was still here. And when the end came, not with sirens, but with a sigh, Asher held his hand. That's how Walter left the world, with someone holding him. Finally seen, finally loved. The house went quiet, not just in sound, but in spirit. For weeks, Asher couldn't touch Walter's things, couldn't bear to enter the attic or smell the oil paint. He moved into the back room of the house and lived among shadows, waiting for grief to dull enough to breathe through. Then came the letter, not from his parents, from the county. It was about a child Leo had been abandoned at the church steps, 4 years old. No one claimed him. The social worker said they were calling because Walter had listed Asher as next of kin for emergency fostering. It wasn't legally binding, but they asked anyway, "Would you consider taking the boy in just for a few weeks?" Asher said yes before he could think of reasons not to. Leo was shy. Big eyes, no words. He clung to a battered dinosaur plush and didn't let go for the first 3 days, but he liked colors and crayons and pancakes. So Asher cooked and drew and whispered stories about dragons who chose kindness over fire. Slowly, Leo began to nod, then smile, then speak. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into court papers. And one morning, Asher woke up not as someone's son or someone's burden, but as someone's father. He didn't change his life. He folded Leo into it. They lived in Walter's house. Asher opened a small coffee shop in the front room, Gallery Walter, where customers could drink coffee, flip through donated books, and buy art from local kids. Leo ran barefoot through the aisles, handing out napkins and correcting people who called Asher his guardian. "That's my dad," he'd say proudly without hesitation. Asher never told Leo the full truth about where he came from. Not because he was ashamed, but because Leo's life wasn't about the people who left. It was about the man who stayed. And yet, even in the warmth of his new life, a quiet part of Asher braced for the day the past would knock. He never posted his last name on the storefront, never shared childhood photos, never mentioned Indiana in his interviews. But 20 years is a long time for silence to hold. And the day would come, quietly as they all seemed to, when the boy he raised would unknowingly open the door to a man who once closed one on a man Asher hadn't seen since the morning he became invisible. The man came in just after 5. The sun was beginning to sink behind the town's library across the street, casting long amber shadows into Gallery Walter. Most of the regulars had filtered out. Leo was behind the counter, kneeling on a stool, counting the leftover biscotti with a concentration usually reserved for treasure maps. He didn't notice the man at first. No one did. He was tall, older. His military posture softened by time, but still present in the way he stood like furniture. Steady, fixed, unsmiling. He didn't order anything, just walked to the back wall and stood staring at a painting of a house in snow. One of Asher's earliest works hung crooked on purpose. The caption read, "Things that were never said." Leo noticed him eventually, walked over barefoot, dinosaur plush in one hand, a napkin in the other. "You can have this," he offered, holding out the napkin. "You look like someone who forgets to ask for one." The man blinked. "Thank you," he said. His voice was lower than Leo expected. "Not mean, just heavy." "You like that painting?" Leo asked, pointing to the canvas. The man didn't respond right away. "It's familiar," Leo nodded. "My dad painted it. He only paints things that hurt a little." The man's throat moved like he was about to say something but stopped. Leo filled the silence the way children do, without fear. "My name's Leo. I live upstairs. My dad makes pancakes better than anyone. He used to live in the snow like that, painting, but not anymore. Now he makes warm places." The man let out something between a breath and a laugh. "That's so." "Yep," Leo beamed. "He says we don't need to know where people come from to be kind to them." Then, as if remembering a lesson he'd once forgotten to finish, Leo tilted his head. "You remind me of him, though, my dad. You both have the same kind of sad in your eyes. But he doesn't know it's there. Maybe you don't either." The man looked away, blinked too quickly. "Oh, he on," cleared his throat. "Does your dad talk about his family?" Leo shrugged. "He says he used to be a son. Then he wasn't. Then he was a dad instead. I think that's better." The man stepped back, unsettled. "What's your dad's name?" "Asher," Leo answered proudly. "Asher Langley." The name hit like a dropped mirror. The man turned toward the door, nodding awkwardly, as if he'd heard too much too soon. But before he left, Leo called after him. "Hey, if you come back tomorrow, we're hanging up new paintings. One of mine, too. It's a robot that makes hugs." The man paused. A tremor in his hand betrayed him as he reached for the handle. He didn't turn around, just nodded once. That night, Leo told Asher about the quiet man who looked like he hadn't spoken in a long time. He was nice, Leo said, brushing his teeth, but kind of scared, like maybe he used to yell and doesn't know how to stop. Asher froze. He hadn't seen his father in 2 decades. Not in photos, not in crowds, not in nightmares. And now he was here. Asher didn't ask questions. He didn't panic. He just went downstairs, turned off the lights, and sat at the far end of the counter, staring at the empty cup the man had touched. When Leo went to bed, Asher opened the drawer under the register and pulled out an old wrinkled envelope. No return address, no message inside. Just a snapshot, a much younger Asher, maybe 15, arms around his friend Luke at the county fair. It had been left in the mailbox a month after he came out, torn in half, scotch taped back together. The silent kind of cruelty. He thought he'd buried the version of himself who still cared what Nathan Langley thought. But now that version had walked back into his life, not asking for forgiveness, not announcing his presence, just showing up. And what terrified Asher most wasn't that his father had returned. It was that he had talked to Leo first. The next afternoon, the bell above Gallery Walter chimed at precisely 4 o'clock. Asher had been waiting, not like someone expecting a guest, but like someone bracing for an earthquake. He hadn't told Leo anything, just asked him to leave the front desk early and do his coloring upstairs. Leo had pouted but obeyed. His dinosaur plush went with him. His curiosity, however, stayed behind. Nathan Langley entered the shop like a soldier returning to a battlefield he no longer recognized. His jacket was pressed, his hands bare. No cane, no hat, just the same sharp shoulders and colder eyes. He paused inside the doorway, scanning the space not for art but for permission to exist there. Asher didn't offer it. They stood a few feet apart, the silence between them thick and staggering. Nathan's eyes fell to a framed photo by the register, Leo covered in paint, holding up a sign that read, "Dad says messes mean we tried." Nathan's lips moved like he wanted to speak, but forgot the alphabet halfway through. Asher didn't move, didn't flinch, just waited. Finally, Nathan broke, "I didn't know he was your son." Asher looked past him. Would it have mattered? "I don't know," Nathan replied quietly. They stood in that suspended air for what felt like years. The father trying to speak from a place that had never known apology. The son unwilling to build a bridge out of silence. Asher finally spoke, each word sharp as a chisel. "You told me I was shame and embarrassment, a mistake, and now you're standing in the middle of the life I had to build because of you." Nathan nodded slowly. "And it's a good life. It's not yours to say." "I didn't come to say anything." Asher tilted his head. "Then why are you here?" Nathan hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. A drawing, crumpled at the edges but unmistakable. A sketch Leo had given him. The robot with arms outstretched, gears in its chest, handing out hugs. He told me this one was for people who forget how to say sorry. The breath in Asher's lungs caught, not because of the drawing, but because of what it meant, that Leo had trusted a stranger with something made of innocence and hope. And that stranger was a man who had once shattered both. "Did you tell him?" Asher asked. "Who you are?" "No," Nathan said. "He saw enough." And then behind them, a voice called out, "Dad!" Asher turned. Leo stood at the top of the stairs, socks mismatched, a smear of green crayon on his cheek. His dinosaur plush dangled from one arm, the other rubbing his eye. He looked at the two men and blinked. "Is that your dad?" he asked, pointing at Nathan. Neither man answered. Leo patted down the stairs and stood between them. Looked at Nathan, then at Asher. "He's got your nose," he said, "but not your smile." Nathan lowered his eyes. "I lost that a long time ago." Leo tilted his head. "You can borrow my robot. Helps." Then without warning, he wrapped his arms around Nathan's middle in a quick, clumsy hug. Nathan froze. It wasn't the hug of reunion. It was the hug of a child who saw someone hurting and didn't yet know about all the layers people wrap around their pain. Asher stepped forward instinctively, half afraid, half unsure. But Leo had already let go. "I'll be upstairs," the boy said, as if he hadn't just shaken the entire foundation of a man's pride. Nathan stared after him. Asher crossed his arms. "You don't get to walk back in and expect anything. Not from him, not from me." "I didn't expect forgiveness," Nathan said. "I didn't expect anything." Asher looked at his father, not with anger, not with warmth, just exhaustion. "That's good," he said, "because all I have left to offer you is the chance to walk out the door and remember what you missed." Nathan looked at the shop around him, at the plants, the art, the signs of a life not only lived but shared. He stepped back, slowly, respectfully, like a man leaving a church he wasn't invited to enter. And then right before reaching the door, he paused. "I kept the Christmas card," he said. Asher frowned. "You sent it the first year?" "After Walter died, I never responded. But I kept it. I kept the photo too. Leo was just a baby. You looked happy." Asher didn't answer. Couldn't. Nathan opened the door. Outside it had begun to snow. The snow didn't stop that night. It fell like an answer to a question no one dared ask after Nathan left. Asher stood in the empty shop, listening to the faint sound of Leo humming upstairs. The painting his father had stared at, things that were never said, hung silently on the wall like it had been waiting all these years for someone to give it a second look. Asher didn't sleep much. He moved through the house like a man walking through a version of his past that had almost made peace with itself. He didn't expect Nathan to come back. He didn't want him to. Not really, but the next morning there was something on the doorstep. It was wrapped in a gray wool blanket, the kind their family used to keep in the backseat of the old truck for emergencies. Inside was a wooden picture frame, old, scratched, familiar. Asher recognized it immediately. It was the drawing he'd made when he was 10. A house with 4 stick figures, a my mom, a dad, a boy, and a I. He'd given it to Nathan for Father's Day and found it torn up in the garage weeks later after he'd spilled paint on the Sunday suit. But now it had been taped back together, not perfectly. The rips were visible, the tape yellowed, but carefully, lovingly, and it had been reframed, not by a professional, by hand. One more detail, the drawing was hung upside down inside the frame. Asher stared at it for a long time before noticing the note tucked into the back. Just 4 words. I don't know how. He didn't need a name to know who it came from. That day, Asher didn't tell Leo much. Just that some people take longer to learn how to love than others, and when they try, even in the strangest, smallest ways, we get to choose what to do with that. Leo helped him hang the picture in the back of the shop, still upside down. When a customer asked if it was a mistake, Leo said, "No, that's how you know it's real." Weeks passed, Nathan didn't return. But every Sunday, a small envelope arrived, no return address. Just a name in block letters. For Leo, inside were simple things. A sketch of a fire truck, a pressed leaf, a puzzle piece, a poem written in slanted cursive. Leo never asked who sent them. He just added them to a box labeled "Kind Things from Strangers." And Asher, he let it be. He didn't rebuild what had been destroyed. He didn't rewrite the story. He just continued writing the next chapter. With Leo, with the calf, with the quiet power of a child who didn't need to know the past to change it. One evening, Leo came downstairs holding one of the letters. "Dad," he said, "do you think some people show love weird because they never saw it done right?" Asher looked at him, at the face that had never known rejection, at the heart that had never learned how to close a door. "I think," he said slowly, "that some people spend their whole lives waiting for someone brave enough to open it for them." Leo smiled, walked over to the crooked painting, and turned it right side up. Then he stepped back. Maybe it was ready now. And somehow it was. What would you have done in Asher's place? Would you let the door open again, even just a crack? If this story moved, you don't keep it to yourself. Share it, leave a comment, and most importantly, subscribe to HeartStories. Because here we believe every scar has the power to become a window.